Northern California is famous for its towering redwoods and vast, untouched wilderness. It's the kind of place people go to escape the noise of the world, to find peace, isolation, and a connection with nature. But there is a very thin line between being alone and being hunted. We tend to fear the wildlife, the bears, the mountain lions, the rattlesnakes. We prepare for the elements, but we rarely prepare for the scariest variable of all: who else might be out there with us. Today's story comes from a viewer who grew up hiking these mountains. It's a terrifying reminder of why you should never stray too far off the beaten path, and why the most unsettling sound in the middle of a dark forest isn't a scream, but a hum. Turn off the lights and let's get into it. You know that feeling when you're alone in the woods, that primal, deep seated awareness that you are a visitor in a very old, very wild place. Usually, that feeling is liberating. It's why we hike. But sometimes that feeling shifts. It stops being about solitude and starts being about vulnerability. I grew up in Northern California, surrounded by some of the most beautiful, dense forests on the continent. I've spent my whole life hiking those mountains, but there's one trail I won't ever set foot on again. Not after what happened in the summer of 2023. I was 18 at the time. It was that transitional phase of life where you feel old enough and brave enough to take on the world by yourself. I decided I wanted to do a solo overnighter, not at a crowded campground with RVS and generators, but a real secluded experience. I chose a trail that my dad and I used to hike when I was younger. It's one of those spots that rarely shows up on standard maps. You kind of have to know it's there. In all the times I'd hiked it during the day, I had never seen another single soul. It was perfect. There was a catch, though. The specific region where this trail winds through is area where overnight camping is strictly prohibited by the Park Service. I knew this, but honestly, that was part of the appeal. I figured if I was way out there on an unmapped trail, the chances of a ranger rolling up on me were basically zero. It also meant the chances of running into other hikers were even lower. I wanted total isolation. Because I was technically breaking the rules, I had to be stealthy. No roaring campfire. I packed a small propane cooker for food to avoid smoke or light that might give me away. My dad dropped me off at the trailhead early in the morning. I wasn't totally naive. I had plenty of experience in that terrain. I was carrying 3 different knives, more for utility than defense, I thought at the time, and a high decibel whistle, in case a mountain lion got too curious. The hike-in was incredible. It was one of those perfect Northern California summer days. The air smelled like baked pine needles and dust. I hiked all day, pushing deeper into the mountains until I reached a spot I'd picked out on previous trips. It was way off the main trail, hidden in a dense pocket of trees. I set up my small one-man tent, cooked some dinner on the propane stove as the sun went down, and just enjoyed the total silence. It was exactly what I was looking for. By the time full dark settled in, I was zipped into my sleeping bag, feeling accomplished. I drifted off to sleep pretty quickly. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. It was that sudden, jarring transition from deep sleep to wide awake. You know how sometimes you wake up and you don't know why? I lay there in the pitch black, just staring up at the mesh ceiling of my tent, listening. At first, nothing, just the wind high up in the canopy. I almost convinced myself it was a random wake up and started to close my eyes again. Snap! It was close, maybe 20 feet away. A distinct sound of a heavy dry twig breaking under weight. My initial reaction wasn't panic. My brain immediately went to the logical Rolodex of forest noises. Deer are loud, clumsy walkers. Raccoons sound like little bandits rooting around. I lay perfectly still, waiting for the follow up sounds that would confirm it was just wildlife. I was actually preparing to clap my hands loudly to spook whatever it was. Before I could move a muscle, I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break them. That wasn't a four-legged animal. The cadence was wrong. It was slow, deliberate, and heavy. It was the sound of 2 feet pressing into the thick carpet of pine needles and dry twigs. It sounded human. You have to remember where I am. I'm miles from the nearest dirt road, on an unmapped trail, and then significantly off that trail, hidden in the brush, in an area where camping is illegal. The statistical probability of someone just casually strolling past my tent at 2 a.m. was non existent. I reached down to my side and white knuckled the grip of my buck knife. It felt ridiculously small. The footsteps kept coming. They weren't passing by. They were coming toward the tent. They got closer and closer until they were right outside the thin nylon wall of my tent. And then they stopped. I stopped breathing. I couldn't have yelled even if I wanted to. My throat was completely seized up with terror. There was just a thin piece of fabric separating me from whoever or whatever was standing right there in the dark. I just lay frozen, praying they wouldn't unzip the door, praying they couldn't hear my heart beating. Then the silence broke, and what I heard confirmed my absolute worst fears, but in a way I never expected. The thing outside my tent started to hum. It wasn't a melody. It wasn't someone happily humming a tune while hiking. It was this deep, guttural, monotone vibration. It was low in their throat, almost like a growl that was trying to be a hum. It was the most unsettling, unnatural human sound I have ever heard in my life. There was zero doubt now that it was a person. A bear doesn't hum. A mountain lion screams. It doesn't hum. The humming continued for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I was terrified that if I acknowledged them, it would trigger some kind of violent reaction. I just gripped that knife and stared into the dark, waiting for the tent zipper to move. And just as suddenly as it started, the humming stopped. I heard the heavy footsteps again, slowly walking away from the tent side. I almost gasped with relief, but then the sounds changed. A few yards away, near the edge of my little clearing, the footsteps stopped near a large pine tree. I heard this loud, aggressive scratching sound, like fingernails or something hard being raked violently against the tree bark. It lasted for maybe 10 seconds. Then there was an explosion of noise. Whoever it was just bolted. They dashed away through the woods, crashing through the underbrush, breaking branches, kicking up pine needles, creating a massive commotion until the sound faded into the distance. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat upright in my sleeping bag, shivering with adrenaline, clutching that knife until my knuckles turned white. Every rustle of a leaf made me jump. The second the sun cracked the horizon and there was enough gray light to see, I unzipped the tent. I threw everything into my pack. I didn't even bother rolling the tent up properly. I just stuffed it in. I practically ran the entire hike out. I spent the whole morning looking over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone standing in the trail behind me. I made it to the dirt road rendezvous point by noon, hours early. When my family picked me up, I was a wreck. I told them the whole story right there in the car. People always ask me, did you report it? Did you call the Rangers? I didn't, and it was a difficult decision, but I was an 18-year-old kid who had just experienced terror. I knew that to report it meant admitting to federal authorities that I was illegally camping in a restricted zone. I was afraid of the fines or worse. And what could I tell them? I didn't see a face. I didn't have a description. I had a sound and a feeling of dread. I haven't been back to that trail since. I still love the woods, and I still hike, but I don't think I'll ever do a solo overnight trip in that deep of wilderness again. I don't know who was out there that night or why they were humming outside my tent, but I know that sometimes the things that go bump in the night aren't animals. Sometimes they're us